Good morning, everyone. I am San Quan Dan Yaya, Grandpa Don. And I'm very happy to join you this morning to give a short talk on the mindfulness of phenomenon of mental qualities, which is the fourth part. We're going to have some slides whenever they're ready, but this is fine. We can see that there is a in the next slide, we can see that in Satipatthāna Sutta, MN 10, the middle length discourses, Majjhima Nikaya, there are 4 foundations of mindfulness that are discussed in a number of different suttas, but this one in particular, where we talk about mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of feeling, mindfulness of mind, and our subject today, mindfulness of phenomenon. So in the Buddhist suttas, not particularly in this one, but in a number of other ones, the Buddha makes a distinction between what he calls the uninstructed worldling, or sometimes call the run-of-the-mill person, and the noble disciple. So when looking at phenomena, at all of the things in the world, the uninstructed worldling sees what is desirable and tries to attach to it. I like this. I want it to continue. And also the person is angered by what is aversive, what I don't like. I want to get away from that. But that stays in the mind too. We cling to that as well, to remind ourselves, oh, I don't like that. I don't like this person. I don't like this event. I don't like this. And then there's this disinterest or boredom in what is deeper, or practicing a path. Just the run-of-the-mill person, they just want to find the success within the family, which is good, or within the work, which is good, but that's as far as they go. And desire, anger, confusion, jealousy, envy, ego, pride pervades the view of the uninstructed, and is considered normal. They don't want to go beyond that because that's all they know. And so this view is therefore called obstructed. In the next slide, we can see that there are many layers of obstruction, the afflictions that are obvious to us when we have a lust or greed, or when we have anger, hatred, when we're confused or deluded about something. We have envy and pride, ego, pride, and jealousy. Though when we see it, it's an affliction. It's very obvious. And that obstructs what it is that is really wholesome. So the person can say, oh, it's okay for me to be hateful towards this person, or it's okay for me to spend my life trying to make money in order to get a nice car or thing. This is the purpose of my life. Without regard for how it affects other people sometimes. So this is an obstacle to knowing the difference between what is wholesome and what is unwholesome. And then there are the hindrances that we're going to look at. These are the obstacles to the jhanas. These are deeper rooted, that actually give rise to the afflictions. So these hindrances are the deeper roots. But as long as they're there, the tendency to sense-based desire or ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness, agitation, doubt, as long as those hindrances are there, we're not able to enter into the deeper states of concentration. And then there are what are called the fetters, which are the obstacles to the path. When a person has the fetters, they don't realize the value of becoming what we might call a stream enterer or a bodhisattva, or someone who becomes a master of their mind. We don't see that as a path. It's that's just something that not seen. The person is obstructed by their own personal identity view, for example. And then there are taints, which are the obstacles to release. We won't get into that so much today. But the noble disciple, when looking at phenomenon, the things in the world, the noble disciple sees the danger in the desires. Careful. Danger in anger. Careful. Danger in not following the right path. Very careful. So he refrains and rids himself of this greed and anger and confusion, jealousy, envy, ego, pride, pervading the view that would get in the way of being the noble disciple, and therefore this is called unobstructed. So in the Satipatthāna Sutta, the four foundations of mindfulness, we can see that on the next slide, many words. Okay, so the mindfulness of the body is divided into 6 parts, and the mindfulness of feeling also divided into 6 parts, and the mindfulness of mind divided into 8 pairs, and the mindfulness of phenomenon divided into 5 parts. So we can see that we can unfold all of this, and we can go deeper in the practice. Once we realize, oh, I want to follow a path, I want to go deeper, then the person begins to practice and they become aware of these different levels. They can go deeper. So the mindfulness of phenomenon is important because this tendency to attach to our experience without seeing what it is that's really going on when we have this clinging or attachment to our experience, without seeing that, we can't go very far. So we become aware of these 5 hindrances. We say, oh, I want to go deeper. I want to uproot the hindrance like a weed that continues to grow over and over and over again. I want to go deeper. And with the 5 aggregates, I don't want to get confused and believe that these aggregates are what it is that's going to bring me happiness, or that this is what myself is. In the same way, my 6 senses, I don't want to depend on them for my internal happiness. I know that I have these senses and that they're useful to me, but I don't want to believe that that's what it is that's going to bring the internal happiness. And in the same way, the 7 factors of enlightenment, that's what brings the happiness. That's what brings the joy and the tranquility. I want to cultivate those, helping me to realize the 4 noble truths. So let's look at the 5 hindrances a little bit more closely. We have the tendency toward sense-based pleasure, the tendency toward anger, hatred, ill will, aversion, the tendency toward laziness, sloth, torpor, sleepiness, the tendency to restlessness and regret, agitation, and then the tendency to doubt and uncertainty. And in the next slide, you can see I provided it for you in Pali, just in case you run into some Pali speakers out there and you want to say, oh, I'm suffering from kamachanda. Kama is the sense-based pleasure, and chanda is the tendency toward. I'm suffering from vyapada. Oh, I'm always stuck in ill will. towards something, enough ill will, then I get stuck in ill will, even towards myself. And of course, I have the Chinese there for our Chinese friends. So when we practice the 5 hindrances in the Satipatthāna Sutta, there is a formula that's given. So we notice when for example, the sensual pleasure is present within. We notice when it's not there. We notice in the next slide when it arises. When it hasn't been there, suddenly it arises up. Then we learn how to abandon this sensual pleasure. We recognize the danger. We know that it's gratifying. We see the gratification, the danger, and we say, this is not the way to escape this distress. So I don't want to hold on to it. I want to abandon this notion that the sensual pleasure is going to be the source of my internal happiness. And then this does not arise. And we do this in the same way with ill will, sloth and drowsiness, restlessness, anxiety, and uncertainty. We do this with all of the Soma Thera, one of the great teachers, he says of sloth and torpor, through wrong reflection on the state of boredom and the like, sloth and torpor comes to be. Boredom is just dissatisfaction. Lassitude is the body laziness. Languidity or languidity of the body is the bending of the body's torpidity in getting up and in similar actions. So we get stuck in lethargy, sleepiness, low energy. Soma Thera also says of doubt that there are 6 things which help us throughout doubt. We learn the Buddha's teaching. We inquire about the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. We understand thoroughly the teaching. And we become decided about the truth of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. We decide, oh, okay, this is what I'm going to follow. And we're helpful in our companionships with others. And we have good, stimulating conversations that help us connect. And in the next slide, we can see that there is what is called, what Bhikkhu Analia calls, and I like his phrase, the Satipatthāna refrain. At the end of each section of Satipatthāna, there is this same practice that I'm going to summarize in the next slide, where we practice internally and externally. We notice the origination and passing away. And I like the next one very much. We're mindful to the extent necessary for knowledge and remembrance. In other words, we do pay attention to the past and what we have to do in the future, but only to what is practical. We use the knowledge that we have from the past. We remember what taught us. This is wholesome, this is unwholesome, etc. We remember that. But we don't cling to anything in this world. Non-clinging is an entire practice in and of itself. So then we go to the 5 clinging aggregates. This is how the clinging happens. The next slide, we can see the form, feeling, perception, conception, the mental formations or the habitual patterns and the stream of consciousness that we have. These are the things that cause us to have a clinging. We see an object and we say, oh, I really want this object. That's what'll bring me happiness. We have a feeling inside of us. We say, oh, this is the feeling. I want to hold on to that feeling, or I want to get rid of that feeling. I perceive something. I want to hold on to it. This is really me. This is me. I like this. This is my habitual pattern. This is I can't change that. No way. And my consciousness, this is my personality. Not able to change that, but realizing that when you look at yourself, are you the same? Do you have the same mental patterns now that you had when you were 5 years old, or 10, 15, 20? Even for myself at 75, I don't have the same pattern as I had when I was 70. Practices change. Who we are change. This is not a stable view of self. And in the Satipatthāna, this is what is discussed. In the next slide, we can see, we look at these clinging aggregates and we notice that they all come and go. There's the rising and ceasing of each of the clinging aggregates. I have a feeling in my body, it comes and then it goes. I have a perception, it comes and goes. Even my mental patterns, they come and go. And my consciousness too. Rising and ceasing. This is why when we practice the breathing, rising and ceasing, it trains the mind to see the world this way. And then at the end of this section also, we have the same Satipatthāna refrain. And then when we come to the 6 bases of the senses, the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind, and we have the visual object and the sound, smell, taste, touch, imagination, thoughts, and then this leads to the different levels of consciousness: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind consciousness. Now, during the time of the Buddha, they did not have functional MRIs. They didn't have a way of being able to examine what goes on inside the brain. So they didn't have the term neural pathway. So they instead had the term of eye realm consciousness. So we have these 6 sense bases. We have our organs. And do we examine and understand maybe our organs in the next slide? Maybe these just organs. Yes, this is okay slide. Yes, we have these organs and we think to ourselves, this is what the world is. But if we had different organs, or if our organs function differently, and certainly there are many creatures out there whose organs function more different than we do, for those people who know me, they know my favorite joke about the dog and why the dog is so friendly to us. The dog is friendly to us because he feels sorry for us because we can't smell. And when we're not around, the dogs say to me, oh, my master, he is the biped without a smell. He has to rely on me. Poor human. And so it is with many creatures. They have much better eye sense or nose sense, tongue sense, body sense. We're superior in mind faculty, probably. Although we can create a lot of trouble too. So when we look at the 6 sense bases, I provided this for you in Chinese as well. So this practice of understanding that the sense base is just a sense base. Ayatana is just the ayatana. It's just a basis. for how it is that we look at the world. And if we analyze it, Bhavanga, if we look at it carefully, we can see that these ayatana are just the way in which we are constructed to be able to interact. This is the method that has been given to us to help us move from our one state to another state of mind. It just helps us get around. Why do we get around? So that we can practice the path. So in the Satipatthāna as well, it teaches us about how this takes place, and then the introducing the word fetter a couple of slides later. This is how the mind, if it attaches to things and believes that this self is real and that the objects are real, we create this fetter. This is the identity. We begin to believe in it. We have superstitions about it even. When I am with my wife in the car and I say to her, "Oh, your car sounds really good." She says, "Don't say that. You're jinxing the car. The car is going to hear you and will stop working." So we have this false sense of things. So maybe we have to say 3 Hail Marys or 3 Om Mani Padme Hum, so that so that we don't. That's the Tibetan version. So that we don't. She doesn't have a Tibetan car, so that's okay. Maybe we need to learn how to say it in Japanese, since she has a Japanese car. So Satipatthāna refrain again, we have the internal, external, origination and passing away, and the mindfulness, but no clinging. Be careful. And then we come to the 7 factors of enlightenment. I tried to work on this slide, but not sure it turned out okay. I always like to have a little visual, but this one may not have come across well, but I won't attach to it. In the next slide, quickly, we will see that we have the mindfulness. This is very important. Beginning practice. Investigation. We learn, we examine, we question. We don't just take things just because my teacher said this, or it was something that was said of old, or this is how people practice it. No, we decide for ourselves. In the Kalama Sutta, the Buddha talks about, you have to figure it out yourself. You just can't rely on memorizing something that somebody else said. You have to see if it's true within your own life. So you need this diligent energy. You need to really be persistent, because difficulties will arise. And then if you put these 3 things together, mindfulness, investigation, and diligent energy together, then you begin to experience, just as by nature, a joyfulness arises within. Sometimes this is called rapture. I like joyfulness. But we don't want to get stuck in the joyfulness. If we get stuck in the joyfulness, we can't go further. So we need to go to tranquility. A tranquility of, we can also say, another kind of happiness. Passaddhi is a way of being able to transition from joyfulness into sukha, into happiness. Here, the happiness is not separated out. It's just part, we can say, part of the tranquility. And then these concentrated states emerge much deeper. We can go into deeper stages. And then we can understand equanimity at a deeper level. So these 7 factors of awakening can arise within us, and we want to bring them to their culmination. So in the other ones, You notice that we got to the last section and they say always abandoning, abandon the five hindrances, abandon the clinging to the aggregates, abandon the thinking that the six senses are what's real and what's going to bring us happiness. And we recognize, no, here we want to bring this to the culmination of the development. So we can use this as a factor for awakening. And again, we use the Satipatthāna refrain. And finally, we come to the Four Noble Truths. So when we are beginning our practice of understanding the way of the Buddha, we understand that, dukkha. And we understand the origin of dukkha, the samudaya, the origination of how clinging and craving are attached to our ignorance, thinking, oh, this is going to make me happy, but in fact, not so much. Then we discover that there's a path, we want to follow that path. And then we realize the cessation. So this Four Noble Truths of brings us to this awakening. So this is why we practice. And then, of course, the path itself is the Eightfold Path. You can see it in the next slide. We have if you look on the internet, you can find this, but sometimes they make the mistake and they have right concentration and right mindfulness in the wrong place. They have them interchanged. So fortunately, found one on the internet that had it correct. And then in the next slide, we can see that the Four Noble Truths can be expanded into 12 stages, 12 permutations, the Four Noble Truths. This is a subject for another time. So we understand the noble truth of suffering. We know its origination. We know that there is a cessation and that there's a path leading to the cessation, but that's just our hearing it. That's in the first stage. But then here in the seven factors of awakening, it's not in the first stage anymore. Now we're working on the task to be completed. So we can fully understand it. We can learn how to abandon it. We learn how to realize and to develop it and put it into practice so that it is fully understood and fully abandoned, fully realized, and fully developed. So when we do it at this level, we're at the second and third levels, not just the hearing stage. This is what is said in the Satipatthāna Sutta. That leads us again to the summary. So I'm going to do the Satipatthāna refrain as our dedication. In this way, we remain focused internally on mental qualities in and of themselves, or externally on mental qualities in and of themselves, or both internally and externally on mental qualities in and of themselves, or we remain focused on the phenomenon of the origination with regard to mental qualities, on the phenomenon of passing away in regard to mental qualities, or on the phenomenon of origination and passing away with regard to mental qualities. And one's mindfulness is to the extent necessary for knowledge and remembrance. And we remain independent and unsustained, not clinging to anything in this world. And this is how a person remains focused on the mental qualities in and of themselves. We'll reference to all of the mental qualities, the hindrances, the clinging aggregates, the six senses, the seven factors of awakening, and the Four Noble Truths. So thank you very much for joining me this morning and learning a little bit more, investigating the phenomenon, so that when we now face to the world, we don't get so stuck. Our grasping, we say, oh, this is just not so valuable. The valuable is in the practice on the path.